Welcome back, all of our blue-collar, roughneck friends. This is the Working Joe's podcast. You're listening to Zack and Ralph. Welcome back to the Working Joe's podcast. You're listening to Zack Psioda, and I'm sitting across the internet from Mr. Ralph Wolf, a man famous for drinking Stop Leak. Ralph, how are your vitals?
My vitals are fine. Everything, I wasn't sealed up like everybody thought I was going to be.
Yep.
Everything came out just fine.
No catastrophic constipation?
Nothing. None. That stuff's so oily, there's no constipation. You just slide right out.
How does it stop the actual refrigerant? So why don't you tell us, this fella, James, he's going to come talk to us?
Yeah, actually, he was on Brian Orr's podcast. He's from Rector Seal, and he was talking about the heart start kits. I didn't get to listen to that podcast, but I'm going to go look it up and listen to it.
I listened to it. It was a really good podcast, and they were doing it inside of a cafe or something like that.
Right. They had met somewhere. There was some show or something like that, and they had met, and he had really good things to say about Brian, and so he agreed to do the podcast, and when I talked to him the other day, I told him what we were doing, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to go on it."
Well, that'll be a really good one because a lot of people have a negative opinion of Stop Leak.
Right. Hey, look, like I told everybody, if the man is willing to send me 14 samples, and you saw all the things that he sent me, if he's willing to send me that much, there's got to be something to it. So I said, let me give him the, the time of day, or let me give him the opportunity to plead his case.
Right. And this isn't the first guy to send you Stop Leak, is it?
No, it's not. And I actually, you know what? If they send it to me, and I don't think it's going to do any damage to the equipment, and I honestly, that stuff in the metal can, I absolutely despise that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have seen it in action. But this other stuff, it's like I said, it's oil-based, and I know that there's guys out there that are like, man, I would not ever put that stuff in the system. But, if you're on a 14-year-old system that's on its last leg, and this stuff is just oil, it's more than just oil. There's some certain blends that cause it to do what it does, but it's not going to clog up the inside of a system, because inside a system it's just oil.
Right.
And it reacts with itself, so how can it really do damage to it if it's just an oil?
Yeah, I like this whole dynamic here on a couple different levels. I like the fact that this is the same guy. Speaking of Brian Orr's thing, they talked about the Kickstart, which is like a competitor of the 521, which is what I use on the truck. So if we bring him on and he's representing Stop Leak, and guys are like, well, I hate Stop Leak. This is a bunch of junk. So does that translate to the Kickstart's also junk? It's kind of funny how it's going to work out. He's the same guy representing all this stuff.
Right.
So, their opinions of Stop Leak are going to factor into pretty much everything he says.
Exactly.
So he's got a lot of proving to do, which is a good thing. He might be able to get it done and convince everybody.
Right. And after talking to him, I was really like, well, I'm gonna give it a try. And I did ask him. I said, well, if it's just oil, can you drink it? Can you ingest it? And he was like, well, I guess you could. So, with his permission, his permission, I said, let's do it.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe you drank it. I can't believe you drank Stop Leak. Even if the guy said it's okay, that's crazy.
I just took a little shot of it. I looked at it. There was no toxic it's swallowed, it's ingested, contact poison control. There was nothing like that on the, on the package at all. We live in the age of sue happy people, and everybody you heard that Bill Engvall song, "Here's Your Sign."
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go.
Oh my god! I still can't
There was
believe it.
no like,
I still can't believe you actually drank it because they. I don't know. It's like the deodorant that says "Do not eat." Yeah, they say that on a bunch of random stuff just to cover their butts. But
did you know?
still,
Did you know? Speaking of that, though, toothpaste is actually poisonous. The stuff that's in the toothpaste is actually poisonous. And where do you put it? You put it in your mouth to brush your teeth.
oh yeah, they say not to swallow the
But,
stuff. All the
but if
kids are
you
out there.
swallow it, yeah,
You
if
know.
you swallow it, it is actually poisonous.
Yeah. Well, and
So,
you eat Stop Leak in a world
well,
where you can't eat toothpaste, something that's already in your mouth. You decide to put Stop Leak in it.
hey, and I told a customer that I was at her house on Friday. We did a complete system change out. Actually, the video deal where I did the video on the Testos where it was, going into
Right.
negative pressure.
Which we're going to talk about here shortly.
Yeah, which we're going to talk about. Um, and I told her, I said, well, your system is about, I weighed it in, so it was 14 ounces low, and I said it's a prime candidate because it's like 16 years old, and it's only 14 ounces low, and I know nobody else has been to their house in the last 3 years. I did a mini split when they first moved in that house,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 years actually. I think it's probably closer to 4. So I did a mini split in their basement, and they finished it off. And actually, I did a video on that mini split. It leaked, and then so I had to change the coil on it. So I did do a video on it with the 50,000 screws that
Yeah.
you had to take out to take the coil out. And I told her, I said, your unit is the perfect candidate for that product because it was only about 14 ounces low. And I explained to her about how I actually drank it, took the shot, and she just rolled her eyes and she shook her head. Just the same reaction I got from the girl I'm seeing. She just rolled her eyes and shook her head.
Well, it is crazy sounding. Literally like an industrial compound, and you're going to ingest it. So,
hey, but like I said, there was no warning signs on that tube whatsoever. So I was like, hey, what the hell?
wow.
Let me do what I got to do.
Well, I don't. Well, that's true. It didn't have any warning signs.
Now, would I have taken that
so
shot glass
crazy.
that I had and filled it up and tipped it back? Probably not.
Well, I'm glad.
But I didn't see what just taking a little shot was going to hurt.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Ralph's insane, but that's fine. He's still alive, which is the important thing. He's still alive.
Still alive.
And that's going to be a segue into what are we doing today on the podcast.
What are we doing today?
Well, my gosh, we have. Well, I must say we have the Yoda of our group coming to talk to us, Mr. Jim Bergmann.
He is one of the, YouTube and I don't know about you, Zach, but YouTube has opened a lot of doors for me. I mean, it really, really has. I've got to talk to people and go places that I never thought I would ever get to go. Talk to people that I never would have ever thought I'd get to talk to. Meet guys like you. Meet guys like you and John Israel and Larry Cole and I can't name everybody.
It's a long list. It's a lot of people,
It's a very long list, and there are a lot of fine. You remember when we first started doing this? Making YouTube videos was a no-no.
Oh, sure, yeah, we got kicked around quite a bit on different websites.
Yes. And I've had my little share of it. It hadn't been too much, but it was really no. You do not make YouTube videos.
That's right.
You do not show people how to do things. We want those guys to come in our groups, ask them questions so we can kick them around. We don't want you teaching them. You know what I mean?
That's right.
And the guy we're gonna, Jim, he's really, an upstanding guy. I mean, really is. And you'll hear it in the interview. He took a beating.
Sure, yeah.
He really took a beating. And you know what? He took that beating, and I'm sure every day he went into the office, and was like, I wonder who's going to be talking about me today.
Yeah, that's about right. And how different would it be if guys like him and yourself and myself never made these videos? The industry, I'm not going to say we're a huge catalyst for change in the industry, but I think a lot of these tools and a lot of the turns that have been made wouldn't have translated to regular guys because they would never have known about them. You wouldn't see the changing and the gauges, especially because gauges are real hot all the time.
Right. Yeah, because I know how Sporling got into it. And Jim, Jim's just a natural teacher. He's always going to be, trying to figure out what's going to be the best way to teach somebody how to do something in the industry. And he's passionate about it. From the little 1.5 ton, little beater system out there to the biggest chiller.
Yeah. Sure.
He wants to run perfect.
Yeah. He's above and beyond, the average guy. And it's a perfect guy to love to teach people because he really is. He just loves this stuff. Like he said, he can't turn it off. Which is the case with a lot of us. We end up doing it after hours, thinking about it, talking like we're talking right now here after hours about HVAC,
Right.
What losers are we? You know what I'm saying?
We get so involved with it, it becomes, a personal thing for us in some ways.
No, you're right. It does. It gets integrated into our lives. I know my wife has heard the word, I was working on this unit today. She's heard that line about 1,000,000 times.
Oh, I know.
And I know she could care less what happened with that unit today, but I still walk in there and say it because it's just natural. It's just what happens.
Man, I was working on this unit today, and I forgot to pull the disconnect, and I watched the outdoor coil, and,
Yeah. I talked to Ralph today. He hates stop leak. Hey, what an idiot, huh? Just kidding.
He just probably rolled her eyes and shook her head, too.
What stop leak? No, you don't even want to know. It's like the kid in school that eats Elmer's glue. That's Ralph all grown up.
Yep. And I ate it. I used to enjoy it when at the end of it, in the dry glue.
Oh God.
The dry glue at the cap.
Well,
so
on that happy note, why don't we get on to talking to Mr. Jim Bergmann?
Let's talk to Jim. I'm tired of sharing my story.
New Chinese-made Testo products. What is your opinion, Jim? Good or bad? And official? Can we answer or not?
Yeah, I'll officially answer that one. They're really good for what they're intended for, and they're intended for air conditioning applications. They're not intended to be used for refrigeration. They're not a temperature compensated sensor. They're intended to be zero before you use them. I've actually tested quite a few of them. The humidity. The 605i is probably one of the better humidity measurement devices I've ever tested. I mean, Testo really does a good job with humidity. The clamps are okay. I'm not a real big fan of the thermistor design with a barrel on it. Because just the percentage of the barrel that actually contacts the pipe is low. But I mean, Testo. They do a really good. If you actually saw what they do with temperature, they take all that kind of stuff into account. So I mean, when they engineer it, they're clamping on a pipe. They're measuring the internal temperature of the pipe. They're measuring the external temperature of the pipe. They're doing offsets. They're doing things to make sure that they're taking, that they get an accurate measurement. So, I mean, I'm not a fan of the barrel design. Testo still gets a good temperature measurement out of it. But for what those things are. And for what you pay for them, I mean, they're really a good good product for the money. The thing that's always amazed me a little bit is that because when I worked with Testo, they everything was like really high end, really expensive stuff, and I've sort of been surprised to see them go towards the commodity side of the business. I never thought I'd see Testo go there.
Well. I made a comment, or one of the guys made a comment, because I did a video yesterday, a little short video, where when I pulled my high side off the gauge or off the unit, -7. Well, I never had it you know, in a negative pressure, but it went there.
Was it on a discharge line or on a liquid line?
It was liquid line. And the pressure was not high. You know what I mean? It was like 230 or something like that. Nothing out of the ordinary. And somebody asked me, well, was the what do I think happened to the quality of their stuff? You know, I was like, I don't know. I really don't understand why, because I noticed it today when I used my gauges, the 550s, is that, you know, I would put refrigerant in the system, and I've noticed this several times on other units, that I'd put refrigerant in the system and it would be stuck at, let's say the pressure went to 150 pounds or 130 pounds or whatever. It would be stuck on my gauges at 100 and whatever the top end was, and it would stay there for like 5 seconds or so, and then it would start working its way down. And I was like, my old gauges never did that. In the beginning, when I first got mine, you know, 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, they never did that. And even my second set that I bought never did that. But this set is like, it's doing all kind of crazy stuff.
It might be possessed. So
I'm thinking so.
Yeah, every once in a while too. You know, I've seen with electronics, if it gets trapped in the rain or something, you get a little moisture in there, or it got moisture in like a temperature port or something, things will act squirrely with electronics. And once anything gets corroded on connection, sometimes you can't even really see it unless you get it under a scope.
Right.
Things can start to act a little squirrely. But you know, those 550s and stuff, I mean, I've never really had too many problems with those. You know, the probes I have seen drift off their zero, but usually only if they're going through a massive temperature change. Like if you have them in your truck's cranking hot, you know, like 120 degrees, you pull that probe out and you zero it and you take it inside, or you take it into an area that's cooler, or it cools off quite a bit from the time you take it out, or it heats up quite a bit from the time you take it out. If it changes in temperature, it's going to change its 0 point. 100% guarantee, because they're not temperature compensated sensors. One of the things I've done in other instruments that I've designed is we did fully temperature compensated sensors, and so they're compensated from like -40 to 140. And so as the pressure sensor changes its temperature, it doesn't drift off of zero. And that's real important if you're doing like refrigeration, or even if you're like throttling refrigerant through a manifold and it's flashing, and that sensor, you know, goes from like ambient down to let's say, you know, 20, 30 degrees or 40 degrees. It's going to mess with the calibration of that sensor for a few minutes till it comes back up to ambient. And that may be something you're seeing. And it could just be a bad sensor too. But that's the challenge. You know, one of the things that, for me personally, I've always liked selling like the really high end stuff. The higher end stuff, the better for me. And a lot of manufacturers, they have trouble selling the high end stuff because they can't explain to people why what makes it better, what makes it good. So what they're doing is commoditizing their brands, because they feel like they're losing ground, because they think technicians don't care. Right. And I always, you know, think, well, technicians really do care, but nobody's told them why they should.
Oh yeah, well, that's what you're here for.
Once they understand why they should care, then all of a sudden it makes a difference, you know. But if nobody's there to educate them, and that's the sad thing in our industry, especially like when you look at counter guys and what's happened to distribution. I mean, this big reason TruTech Tools is so successful is because the guys over there actually get a test instruments, they figure out how it works, they understand what it does, and they care about what they're selling, versus somebody that you know, wants to sell you another roll of duct tape and some screws and, you know, commodity stuff. I mean, well,
that's a lot of these guys, their job is from 8 to 5. You know,
yeah, it's changed. Wholesale's definitely changed. But, you know, you think about the smart tool and, you know, what you do with, you know, the stuff you did early on with that, you probably did more good for the smart tool than
their own guys did.
Well, and distribution did, because nobody knew anything about it.
Yeah, they didn't know anything about it.
You are absolutely right about that. Their job was horrible. Ralph's the only reason I think they sold many of those things.
Yeah, and they understood that, and that, hey, I did believe in that tool, so I had no problem doing it.
Yeah, and I think for what it was, I mean, it's and what it is today, it's still not a bad tool. It's and it's actually nice to see Sportland's made some improvements to it with temperature compensated sensors now, and they've done some things, and I think they're going to do more things in the future for sure on that. But I mean, it's at least it's improving and not staying status quo.
Right. No, they do. After meeting those guys, last year, and I kind of knew it before, but after meeting them, they want to make the best product they possibly can.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see him go in the tool industry, though, of all places.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of Sportland, I think of TXVs, filter dryers, and refrigeration accessories. They're like the last people I think of to go into the tool business. Just about like I'd expect Testo to come out with a TXV.
Well, hey, shh.
But
don't say that too loud, because it may happen. They're having a hard enough time with all their different products they're trying to.
They sell a whole lot of those new products. I mean, they're low end stuff. They sell a ton of them. Smart probes are everywhere, right?
Yeah, I think they're doing exceedingly well. What's interesting is everybody, we would call those products when I worked at Testo a taste of Testo, where they were cheap, and you get a little taste of what Testo had to offer without making a huge investment,
and it keeps them coming back.
Yeah, for what they are, they're not that bad. I mean, it's you can always go to the higher end stuff. If you want to go to the higher end stuff, you can always spend more money, but at least it gives you a taste of the brand.
Right.
When you hold that little thing in your hand for what you paid for it, it actually feels, I mean, what Testo's been doing really well the last couple of years is they make tools feel like they're quality tools.
Hey, that 550, I put it in my hand, and it's just like, I can't do any other gauge like that. I guess the CPS is similar.
S-Man's too big to hold.
Yeah, the S-Man, I had to use both hands.
Yeah, that's right. This is quite a gauge right here.
I had to get the kids' Tonka truck and tow the Tonka truck with a string just to tote the S-Mans to the air conditioner.
Well, you will never lose them, at least.
No.
Not that was an issue before.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride in our industry, that's for sure, because I mean, I've gone back to the very first digital gauges that came out, and I'm not sure, to be honest with you, whether it was Digicool or a Testo, because they were so close to each other. Doug Lockhart might have had the very first one. It was I think it was called a BD 1000 or something like that, and it was it didn't even have temperature on it. It was just pressure. In fact, he was trying to do everything with pressure, even detect flooding with pressure. That's what that graph, the bar graph he had on there on the gauge set was for detecting flooding. It was he called them micro pressures, whereas the refrigerant would go past the suction line, it would be flashing, changing from a liquid to a vapor, and he said his pressure transducers were sensitive enough that they could pick up on that, and that's what that bar graph was for on there.
So it was kind of like a lie detector then.
Yeah, it was. It was. It never, never really took off in the mainstream, but it had an extremely cultish following of people that still swear by him today.
Right. So, a lot of guys on HVAC talk.
Yeah, some of our buddies, Joe Shearer and Rob, they both love.
Yep, Rob loves his.
Yeah, that was the second. Believe it or not, when I owned TruTech, that was the second product line that I ever took on.
Wow.
We were selling so much Testo at the time that that Testo was concerned that people would think we were that other distribution would think that we were selling, Testo was selling product out the back door,
right?
Because
kind of like they did with the iManifold.
Yeah, and
kind of like when it came out, TruTech pretty had an exclusive deal with them.
Well, it looked like it, but it never was. It just happened to be that TruTech knew how to sell them.
Right.
and stocked them. You know, that's still their claim to fame today. Is they have a huge warehouse. I want to say it's 40 by 100 right now. A space just, I mean, shelves front to back. You know, 6 to 8 foot tall, just full of tools. I mean, I walked in there the other day and I look at, you know, where it was when I left it and where it's at now. It's probably doubled in inventory size.
Wow.
Wow.
You know, we keep hinting at like the early digital gauges, but what about the early Jim Bergmann? You know, we all know your dad was in the HVAC industry, but
yep.
Now, did you get in it? I guess you got in it because of him.
Well, I've been rolling. I started rolling with my dad when I was 2. Wow. And my mom had epilepsy, so she was in the hospital a lot when in fact, my mom was in the hospital every year for 18 years. She was in for something, right. You know. So my dad would grab me and, you know, on Saturdays and stuff like that. Come on, we're going to work. Come on, we're going to work. You know.
At 2 years old, huh?
Oh yeah, I remember. You know, going to. We went to a church in Brunswick and we were doing the HVAC. We were actually putting a boiler in, and I remember being real little and just, you know, carrying a wrench or something around, following him around, and you know, riding along with him. I mean, I remember hearing my first centrifugal start when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, you know, and just about, you know, trying to crawl underneath him. I was so scared when I heard that thing start because the big clap of the disconnect pulling in, and then you know, that wind up like a jet engine.
That was Jim's boogeyman.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I started riding with him, and then I got I wanted to go to vocational school. You know, my dad never wanted me to do this for a living. He was adamantly against it. Right. And one of the guys he worked with one day, Mike. I can't remember, Mike Scott, he told my dad, he goes, you ever wanted for anything? He goes, no. He goes, your kids ever wanted for anything? He's like, no. He goes, and what the hell are you keeping your kid doing this for a living for? He goes, we both made a good living at it. He goes, not a bad living. Let him if he wants to do this, let him do it. If he doesn't, you know, if he wants to go to college, at least he'll be able to do this too and have a trade under his belt. Right. But if for some reason college doesn't work out, you know, then what's he going to do then? You know? Right. So my dad let me go to vocational school, and I ended up graduating top of my class there. A lot of it because, you know, I rode with him, and he taught me a lot of stuff along the way. And so then I went to work, and then I went into the Navy. I was in the Seabees, and I did heating, air conditioning, and plumbing as a utilities man in the Seabees. Graduated top of my class in the Seabees. Spent 3 years doing that, and then went into little residential, and then worked my way into commercial industrial. When I left Gardner Train, who I was working with, I was doing pretty much stuff from, like, I would say between 70 and 700 tons. You know, smaller stuff, not the big stuff my dad worked on. He did mostly centrifugal chillers and a couple of absorbers and stuff like that, but mostly centrifugal chillers. I did mostly what I call built-up systems, so big splits. Right. You know, at the time when I got out, I actually went into education. I want to say in like 2002. They were just coming out with a lot of screws, you know, so we're just doing some startups and the screws and that kind of stuff. And so most of the stuff, my background's all recips, and bigger, you know, multi-compressor systems, that kind of stuff. Chillers. I did a lot of process cooling, meaning like you know, PPG, you know, places where they're making glass or Tyvek or something like that, where they needed process cooling and that kind of stuff. So then I ran a residential company, Bergmann Enterprises, for probably a good 10 years while I was doing commercial stuff, because the commercial company I was with, they didn't care if we did side work, residential work, as long as we weren't using their truck and their stock. So I actually had my own service van, and I'd hop in the top man after I got home from work. I'd go out and work, or I called it SS&E, Saturday, Sunday, and evening. You know, work. So I did that for probably 10 years also. But you know, a lot of when I did it on my own, I always sold the higher end stuff, higher end equipment. And I had that's one thing. It's hard for me to sometimes, like when I think about some of the markets, Zack and I were talking about, like I'm into doing reporting and doing analytics and doing the high end tools and high end systems, because where I'm up here in the Cleveland market, and there's a big demand for those types of systems up here, because just like you guys, just like the mini splits, not everybody in your area is putting mini splits in, so you sort of have a niche in the market, and I had a niche in the market up here with high end systems. So I'd sell, the higher SEER stuff, but also zoning, humidifier, electronic air cleaner, energy recovery ventilator. I made to put for me, a typical job was between $10,000 and $15,000 for residential stuff. And this is, my gosh, almost 20 years ago now, wow. 15 years ago now. And so when I sit there sometimes, what you guys are, some of the challenges you guys have in the markets you're in, for me, it's like, I purposely separated myself from those markets because they're here too, but we also had the higher end stuff, and not every part of the country has that higher end market available.
Right. Fortunately, we're in the Atlanta market. We have the same stuff. I mean, there's companies out there doing the $20,000 systems that, zoning, steamers, well, at that time, 2-stage equipment. And I've been on a job before and looked up in the rafters, and one of the guys, the company I worked for, that's what he did. He wrote on there, "Better call," and with the name of the company I worked for. Mm-hmm. Because at that time we were the only guys that knew how to work on that stuff.
Yeah, we did space packs too. I don't know if you've ever seen space pack systems.
I remember those.
We used to do a lot of Unicos.
Yeah, so I used to do up here. We have Unico too, but space pack was what my distributor sold, and I put a ton of those in because we have a lot of hot water and steam up here too. Right. And those are expensive jobs. I mean, if you put one in,
yeah. Because they have to be done the right way. If they're not done the right way, it's not going to work. Yeah,
and so I used to do a lot of boiler work, a lot of repiping. A lot of guys couldn't pipe boilers correctly, steam. So I don't know. I did anything that was oddball that nobody else wanted to touch that I could charge a good buck for and have fun doing it at the same time.
But now, as you were doing that, since you had a full-time gig, now did you have subs doing your work, or?
No, I never hired any subs. I did. I had an electrician that was a friend of mine that, if anything from the panel to the disconnect, I'd have him do, just because he had everything he needed to do it right. I was a big stickler on doing everything. I was a licensed contractor, so I do everything to code and pull permits and that kind of stuff. And but I was a real big stickler on doing things 100% right. So sometimes, like, I'd hire, almost every job I hired Ole Latham. He was my electrician. I owned a company called Wire Nuts, just because he had everything on his truck to get the job done quick. It's not that I couldn't do it. It's just that with all the stuff he carried, it was easier.
Yeah,
So, but I've grown up with this stuff. It's interesting because I look back at my career, and it's like, my dad didn't. Probably the big difference between me and my dad is, my dad didn't. He did a lot of things a certain way, and he kept doing them a certain way his entire career. And I don't think he ever really knew why, but he knew that they worked better that way.
Right.
So he did them that way. So, like, he had my dad, as long as I can remember, he had 1/2-inch hoses on his truck, and he was evacuating systems going back 20 years ago with 1/2-inch hoses.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there thinking back after I got into doing what I'm doing today and understanding, why we do some of this stuff. I'm thinking, geez, he did it clear back then, but he could probably never tell me why he did it that way. He just figured out one day that, boy, this is a lot faster.
Well, the stuff he was working on was much bigger than what. So he had to get it done faster.
But I thought that's why he had the bigger hoses, because he worked on bigger machines. You just think in your head,
right?
Bigger machines, you got to have bigger hoses. But it's because things like evacuation went twice as fast, 3 times as fast, versus using, actually 16 to 20 times faster than using 1/4-inch hoses. And so maybe he did know it, maybe he didn't. Sometimes, how sometimes your old man is just why do you do it? Just because I told you to do it that way. That's why we do it that way. Type stuff.
So that's on the mini split side. You know, some of the stuff, the manufacturer will not tell you why it's done like that, because that's just their trade secret, and so they won't let that out. And then, so if you call them and say, well, why are you doing it like, or why is it like this, and they'll say that because we said so.
No,
that's why.
Sometimes it's because they don't know. I'll tell you that. I've worked for. No,
that's unsettling right there. That's unsettling thought.
It's magic.
No, it's really it's because like if you were to here, I'll give you a case in point. If you were to take a mini split, right, just a standard mini split, meter device is fixed. It's inside the condensing unit, right? So you got saturated liquid going out to the evaporator and suction vapor coming back. So next time you're out on a unit with a single header, you know, if it's got a single circuit, let's put it that way. So you're not on a VRF system, or if you're on a VRF system that you know it's got a fixed meter device, and you can run it up on full speed. Do this for me. Run it up on full speed. Measure your return and wet bulb. Measure your, charge it the way they tell you to. They're going to tell you to charge it by measure the feet of line set, charge it by the foot.
Weight, man.
Right, by weight. Because that's how the mini split manufacturers know to charge it. They know if you charge it and add this much refrigerant per foot of line set, this is the way it's going to work, and it's going to work every single time.
Right.
So take that same system and use your fixed orifice charging chart on it, and see if it doesn't fall out exactly the same way. It's a fixed orifice system. It's not a. There's nothing magic there, and it's going to end up if you charge it to get it up to the same way, you're going to find out that it's going to end up with about the exact same. If you charge it by the foot, it's going to follow that fixed orifice chart.
Right.
It's just a fixed orifice system. It's not magic. You know, it's just a little different because they're sending that saturated liquid out and bringing it back. But when it comes back to the compressor, guess what? It's got to have about 10 degrees superheat.
Yeah, they do want to maintain a 10 degree superheat. And that, you know, the problem is getting your temperature probe on your suction line. It's because it's so tight in there, you really can't get to it. Now on the bigger stuff you could, but on the
well, you can put it. You can put it on anywhere on the suction line. It doesn't have to be right at the service valve. You can put it on the
in between the service valve and the compressor.
Yeah, but I mean it's not magic, but that's the way the manufacturer knows to charge it. So that's the way they're going to tell you to charge it, because they want to get. If everybody does stuff the same way every time and they don't give you any alternative way to do it, then, if you follow the directions, you're going to be successful.
Right.
But all it is a fixed orifice. It's not magic. So, we forget. But I mean, vacuums probably things driving me the most crazy right now because it seems like as an industry we completely forgot how to evacuate a system. I was laughing. Some of the stuff, like I put a video up this weekend on how to hook up your hoses to the vacuum pump. What kind of you need, just basically from the vacuum rig, from the vacuum pump, the larger diameter hoses to the core tools, and I was just showing it on a tank, right? I put that video up. In fact, I've had that video done for about 2 or 3 weeks now.
Yeah, but you've made that video before a long time ago.
Well, I put it up there, and this wasn't showing the time. That was another video where I showed how to get it done. This was just literally a 2-minute video,
right?
Showing how to do that. Now I'm thinking, nobody's going to watch that video, and in fact, I didn't even want to put it up because it's like. But it was on a timed. Release, so it ends up getting published.
Right.
That video's got like 7,000 views.
Wow.
And it was put up on Friday. Now I'm thinking,
dude, man,
nobody's going to want to watch that video, but that video is being shared over and over again. I can't remember. I mean, maybe it's got 7,000 reach and 3,000 views. I can't remember. It's doing crazy well. And it's the most fundamental thing. Yeah,
it's just and making videos on YouTube, as Zack will tell you too, is the craziest thing. Things that you put up that you think nobody will ever watch.
That's true. That's
gets
true.
the most amount of views.
Yeah.
And it's happened to me, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the videos are crazy, but what I'm finding out more and more is that there's a hunger in our industry for the basics, and these guys are getting out of trade school. And I've been doing this for a lot of years. What interests me sometimes is so far beyond the basics that I forget that everybody else isn't.
Right. They hadn't been doing
stuff for granted.
Just out of diapers, Jim.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
We're
true.
still trying to catch up.
Well, it's I mean, it's really, it's crazy to me sometimes. Like I said, I just sit back here and I go, nobody's going to like this. And then everybody loves it. And I got to go back and do more and more of the basics, because sometimes what I don't realize or what I don't think about is that, I've gotten to that point where it's like, I don't even think about it anymore. And in order to get people to where I want to get them to, I've got to sort of spoon feed them along the way.
Right.
Get them through the basics. They understand the basics. And then once they apply the basics, then getting them to the next level is not a big deal. But it's our industry as a whole, we have forgotten more than I don't, some people think I'm a bright guy. It's not that I'm bright. I just read a lot. I study a lot, and I buy a lot of old books. I buy, I'll go on eBay and buy stuff from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I've got a original printing of Carrier's psychometric manual, from the 30s. I go back and reread all that old stuff. I've got, vacuum engineers books from the 40s and 50s, and they knew all the stuff back then. Right. Engineers knew all that stuff back then. They used to do all this stuff back then, and literally sometimes all I'm doing is reintroducing people to old science that we've forgotten, because
right. And that kind of science really doesn't change.
It doesn't change at all.
How can you change that? You can't. Pulling a vacuum, it's
The interesting thing is, I mean, if this was the case years ago, is it the fact that we never learned this stuff, or is just it wasn't practiced for a long time, or where did it go wrong and now we're relearning it?
It went wrong when marketing people started becoming engineers.
When the boardroom became part of it.
Well, part of it is designed by committee. That's one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy. If you look at the way Steve Jobs designs, Steve Jobs builds what people need,
right? Not
what people want,
right?
And once people get what they actually need, then they figure out how much they want it.
Right, exactly.
But somebody, I'll give you a case in point. One of the things that drives me absolutely insane is micron gauges inside a manifold gauge set. Right? Stupidest thing anybody's ever done, in my opinion, is to put the micron gauge inside the manifold, because it's attached to hoses which leak. It's attached to valves that leak. It's in an area that's subject to all kinds of refrigeration contamination, oil. Why was it put in there? Because some technicians like, man, I got to hook up this gauge. I got no place to hook up my micron gauge. So it'd be awesome if you just put that thing in the manifold, and somebody's like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's put it in the manifold.
Now, was Phil Pease the first one to do that? Or
doesn't Testo do that as well?
Well, they did. Yeah, for Testo either, but why did Testo do it? Well, Testo did it. I'll tell you why Testo did it. It's because Field Piece did it.
The market
because
demanded it.
Yeah, somebody's like, well, this is what we got to do. This is the way we got to do it, because look, they're doing it. Why? Here's another one for you. Subco vacuum gauge, right? All right. So somebody at some point said, I don't have a place to put my micron gauge. So somebody said, well, let's put it in line.
Yeah, right in line.
Right. Well, then you see CPS come out with that.
Right.
You see Testo come out with that. Well, why did they do that? Because everybody else did it. It must be the way that it must be what the industry wants.
Right. So if you give the industry, if you take the industry's choices away, it's like Walmart. Walmart has taken choices of of people away and given us what they think we need.
Yeah, well, they as an industry as a whole, I mean, that's the biggest problem we have today. And then you got technicians that believe because the industry builds a tool that way, that this must be what they want us to do.
I'm into it happens about once a week in a supply house that I go to. I have somebody come in and they want the 4-port manifold. And I asked them why. Why do you want it? Well, because it's got the micron gauge built in, and I'm like, and I tried to explain to them, and I've even shared videos with them, so they would kind of understand that, hey, this stuff is leaking, and it's actually taken me more time to pull a vacuum, and I watch guys struggle where they can never get their micron gauge down, and I'm like, well, dude, you need to check all your hoses, check all your connections, actually get rid of all that.
And then what happens? They do that, and a guy goes, "Well, these micron gauges are a piece of shit. They don't ever work,
Mm-hmm.
So, I've tried a dozen of them. I can't get them to work. I'm just not gonna use them anymore. I can tell by sound when the vacuum pump's deep enough. So
yeah, exactly.
So, and that's, but what the big challenge is we've had, like I said, we have marketing driving manufacturing and design versus sound engineering practices, which have gotten cast to the wind. And, people don't know how to design things anymore. I mean, look at furnace burners, right? Furnace burners, you get on an old ribbon burner,
Mm-hmm.
furnace, they don't make any sound. You hear that? You sit next thing, you hear this. You hear the hiss of gas going into the burner, right?
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Because that burner was designed correctly. It was designed so that it made a very, very small amount of noise. It had trained as a gas shot into that burner. It shot in at a velocity that entrained the correct amount of air, and the burner, by design, was inherently quiet because that's what people wanted. They didn't want the furnace to be so noisy in your house that you realized when it started or stopped.
Well, I can guarantee you, the one complaint that I get when we pull one of those old furnaces out and install a new 80% or 90%, or even my case, my 98% modulating furnace,
mm-hmm.
when it comes on, I can hear it in the crawl space in my living room come on.
Yeah.
And
when that comes back to, sometimes they've forgotten good design principles, and it's been cast to the side, for because it's cheaper to manufacture. I mean, look at a burner today, little in-shop burner, the cost of that burner versus the cost of that ribbon burner.
Because that ribbon burner is expensive.
If you had it was probably 10 times the price.
Yeah, it was like $60, $80 for that thing.
Yeah, but I mean, people are gotten to a point where they just settle. They settle for everything. I mean, it's just the way it is today. As technicians, the thing that I want to just smack some guys upside the head is when they say, "Oh, that's just the way it is." Micron gauges don't work. It's just the way it is. This doesn't work. It's just the way it is. But people got to stop thinking that, especially when it comes to tools and test instruments, that everybody knows what they're doing, because we can see from design. I'll tell you right now, we wouldn't have vacuum gauges and manifolds. We wouldn't allow people to use K-type thermocouples. It would be cast to the wayside because for what we're doing, and not for everything, but for some things, they're not near accurate enough. The old Cooper thermometer is probably the best one you can get out there. The Cooper thermistors. We would get rid of the 1/4-inch port on a vacuum pump. I'd love to eliminate that sucker. I mean, only that's there is a test. That's just a test port. It's not an evacuation port. There's just so many things that that people assume that. And case in point, I think the best example of that we've seen just recently was the Hillmore digital gauge set that came out.
Oh my God, yeah.
That got recalled.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was designed by committee. It had K-type. People said they wanted K-type thermocouples. People said they liked elements of analog and they liked elements of digital. Well, the thing had servo motors in it that drove the the gauges. And if you took the pressure off that thing, it would go click, 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 click. Took like 30 seconds to go from
pressure to zero.
Yeah, from 118 pounds to zero.
Zack, didn't you own one of those?
No. You're thinking of Brent.
Oh.
Yeah, Brent Ridley owned just about everything. Yeah.
Brent's. Yeah.
He bought it just for the kicks, I'm sure.
But it was it had the micron gauge built into the gauge. They did everything everybody in the industry asked them to do,
and they failed miserably at
it. and they fell flat on their face on it. Yeah, I mean, and they've hit I'm not bashing Hillmore either. I mean, they've hit a lot of home runs with tools, because they've also, I think where they've done a good job is said, well, they ask guys, well, who makes the best flaring tool? Well, everybody knows that's rigid.
Mm-hmm.
That rigid flaring tool was the best one by far out there.
The orbital flaring tool.
Yeah. So they came in and they improved it. Right. What Hillmore does well is they look at existing designs that were really sound, and then they make some little improvements to call it their own.
Because I will tell you that I own that Hillmore flaring tool, and I own the bender, and the swedger, and in my opinion, those are the three best tools.
Oh, they're killing it with those tools.
I mean, they're great tools.
Yeah, they're killing it with those tools.
Yeah.
But it's
at one time I'd say the Testo 550 was one of the best tools on the truck, but right now I'm not.
He's wavering. He's wavering on that one.
Well, get off the fence. It's not that bad. I mean, it's it is what it is. It's frustrating. What I don't think a lot of tool manufacturers appreciate is that people make their living with these tools,
right? And
they have to work every single day, 24 hours a day. Whenever the guy needs it, it's got to work and do what it's supposed to do. And that's I think the other thing that I think me personally I've done differently than about anybody else in the test instrument world is I pick up my phone when it rings at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning.
And that is one thing I will say about Jim. He has made himself available to many
that's Ralph people. Calling him at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Hey.
Well, whoever. I mean, it's sort of, I go back, one of my very first customers was Chad Anholt. He's a guy out of Minnesota. And I just talked to him a couple weeks ago. He was on a heat pump or something. He was having some trouble, and he just wanted to ping some advice off me. And
I've called Jim.
He's a one-man shop. Well, he's a one-man shop. He's the owner. If you're a lot of the guys, what they don't appreciate is that, when something goes wrong, they just pick up the phone and call the boss, or they call another technician or they call somebody with experience. Well, when the boss has problems, who the heck does he call? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I get a lot of those kind of calls from owners that are, that it's like they keep me in their back pocket. They get on jobs and are like, I've never seen this before, or, so I get a lot of those kind of calls.
And really, Jim owes us, he owes us nothing. He really does.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I've made a few bucks along the way.
You have.
Testo and True Tech. You
don't have to pick up your phone and answer tech support questions.
No, but, I like doing it because for a couple of reasons. Number one is I usually learn something along the way. A lot of times, a lot of the articles and things I write end up from tech support questions. Guys call me and they're like having an issue with something, and I get that kind of stuff. But the other thing is being a technician, I am empathetic with their position and what's been going on, and it's like I want to help them out if I can help them out.
And a lot of tool manufacturers don't understand that because they've never been in the field. The engineers have been in college. Some of them probably, did like you and work with their dad or whatever. But
you're 100% on spot on. That was like with Zack, back when I remember your videos on iConnect. I'll say it this time. You're like, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I want this. My people in my market, they're not gonna embrace it. It's you're sort of on the fence on that, and it's like I was pretty passionate about the fact that I thought I could change the way you do things and in the way that you worked. And that's a big part of the reason we put you on the beta test team at that point, was because I wanted to make, I was so passionate that you could make money and figure things out and do things differently and get your market to embrace that technology. That was big part of the reason that we kept needling you all the time to get on the test, on the beta teams on that. Even though you waffled back and forth with it, I think it's that's a big part of who I am, is if I can figure out a way to try and help somebody better their career and make more money and be a better technician, that's what I want to do. And I mean, even though you don't use the technology anymore, I think you learned a heck of a lot along the way.
We did. I know for
right.
me, it made me really look at the system a lot different than what I did before it came out.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I know I could sort of get your intention, Jim, on what you were thinking. And in a way, you were correct. By the time I was done using it, I was thinking about the numbers it was getting in a way that I never had before, or sometimes for the first time. And for me, for some reason, when I go through a service call, I can sort of see the numbers and do them as I'm going through in my head. It seems that's the easiest way for me to do them. I don't know why that is.
He's like the Rain Man.
Not quite that good, but somewhere in between. Socially, I'm like the Rain Man. But that sort of opened up my eyes to suction pressures, the different style evaporators, different efficiency evaporators, what I would expect when I went to look at pressures, not just separately, but putting into a cohesive sort of system of numbers that work together, and you could sort of pick out little pieces to explain what was happening. And I sort of learned that by using it. Not that I use it now. I don't use it now. But it taught me those things, that I got to see those and apply those to different tools. So it was a successful mission, just maybe not quite the way you thought it would be.
Yeah, well, it was probably the first time you could see all the mathematical relationships happening in front of you,
right?
And focused on what was being calculated instead of doing the calculations. That's a big challenge of what we have when we're looking at a system, is that, and I think that product really proved that, is there's 20, 30 calculations going on.
Right.
And we tend to look at them one calculation at a time. And all these things are happening in the background, and the system's changing. It's a dynamic thing. It's like, when we first start, our target superheat may be 22 degrees. And by the time we're done, it might be 7 degrees or 10 degrees or 5 degrees.
Depending on how long you've been standing out there.
Yeah. And it's like having those calculations done in real time and having those come back to you. And as you add gas or you change things, you get to see now the impact of everything. The big challenge was, and this goes back to the product I'm designing today, was the fact that the industry wasn't ready for it. It was like it was at my level of thinking, not the industry's level of thinking, because everybody was overwhelmed with the amount of information it gave them.
Right.
It was sort of like buying when I was in high school, I had to buy a graphing calculator, and it, the TI, I don't know what it was. It would do everything. When I first got that thing, I'm like, I had buttons. I didn't even know what to do with sine and cosine and tangent and, all these other, things that would do, and, powers and exponents and things. And it's like, so I took a class, and I sort of learned step by step how to use that calculator, and it sort of became valuable. When I first got that calculator, I'd play around with it, hit digits and hit different things, and sometimes get error keys, sometimes I get some kind of a value, and I'm like, it meant nothing to me at all.
Right.
And we sort of handed the industry a graphing calculator, and we said, woohoo, this is exciting. Now you got all this information at your fingertips. And they're like, Who cares? What do I need this for? You know?
And you're talking to two of them right here.
That's funny. Cosine equals bypass factor, basically, on the Texas Instruments 87. I remember the calculator.
Yeah. Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about, though. I mean, until you learn how to use that calculator, it really was... It was sort of useless to you. What did you use it for? Used to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, right?
Right.
Guess what? Guys bought the iManifold and the iConnect. What do they use it for? Superheat, subcool.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, measure the pressures. It's like buying an iPhone to use the calculator function. That's all I'm going to use it for. Just going to use the calculator because
I know
it's got a really nice calculator.
If I use my iPhone for what it would do, man, I'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
I really would. I pretty much use it for emails and text and playing stupid games.
Yeah, well, and that's the way that most of our industry is, and so I'm backing up, and I don't know. Well, you guys haven't seen Measure Quick yet. Nobody really has.
Stay tuned next June the 6th for part 2 of the interview with Jim Bergmann. And remember, download Android apps such as Stitcher or Podcast Addict to follow the podcast. Or, of course, if you're on an iPhone, use iTunes.